Hey guys, it's Matt. This is the last part of the Mythology series. We're finally going to get to the individual gods, goddesses, myths, heroes, etc. I think this is part 4. I planned to talk about the individual gods in part 1, and we ended up talking about things that are far more important. Why does this Notnilc thing carry these sorts of myths and legends through artificially, like Humpty Dumptys and stuffed Lenins, especially the Greek and Roman, especially the Roman, the Saturn rocket, Mercury, Apollo. The Notnilc is in love with the Greek and the Roman. Why is it carried forth when it should have been forgotten about a long time ago? So the following is done with less emphasis on truth research and more emphasis on general knowledge, or you could almost say cocktail party fun facts. How many of you listening to me go to cocktail parties? Me neither. But, just general fun facts like the legend of Echo and where the word echo in a cave comes from, and her love, this beautiful mountain nymph that fell in love with Narcissus. Part of the story is Echo was cursed by Hera, the wife of Zeus, to repeat everything said around her. But it's also related to the story of Narcissus, who came upon his own image in a pristine mountain lake one day that was like glass. And I guess he was so stupid, he didn't realize it was him. And it was so beautiful, he just laid down beside the lake and stared into it. And then Echo came across Narcissus, and he was so beautiful that she immediately fell in love with him. Imagine how good looking this guy was, even better looking than George Clooney in Ocean's 11. I mean, she falls in love with him, sees him die because he's so stupid, he forgets to eat, drink. He could drink right from the lake, but that would ruin the image. If he goes and puts his lips on the water, it would get all ripples, and he ruin. So he dies, and then Narcissus somehow, Echo was so in love. That's very superficial, Echo, just to be in love with a man over his looks. Who would possibly do that? Then in her lament, she cries out, echoing through the wind. That's also part of the legend. So these are very important cocktail party facts, because I know you all attend them. The first individual god or goddess presented here is a recap of what we looked at regarding the video on Hell 2 weeks back. To me, there's no doubt that the Bible's Hell or Hell came from the more ancient Norse goddess of the underworld, Hel. Also shown in the movie Thor Ragnarok, another recycling of Cate Blanchett as Hela. And then in Apple TV's Severance, you have Heli. And then 2 weeks ago, you have Hurricane Helene, which brought hell to South and North Carolina. All related? Of course it is. Another thing we talked about as we finish up the recap here is, at least to me, and many of you in the comments agreed with me, how strange it is for the Greek gods or pantheon of gods to be carried forth via the Roman, basically being the same gods with sometimes a little bit different traits, but most people would say it's supposed to be the same god, just with a different name. And those names, of course, match the planets. So you have Aphrodite, who has a big role in Homer's Iliad and the Odyssey, and the fall of Troy. So the Greek is Aphrodite, and the Roman is, you can say it, that they know, Venus. Aphrodite, Venus. And in that video a few weeks back, what I thought was rather strange was, doesn't the Italians and Romans have their own gods, their own culture? Why do they just have to go steal from the Greeks? Well, it's pretty obvious that it is the same culture. It's Notnilc. Notnilc was Greece, was ancient Greece in some way. Notnilc, in my opinion, has always been here. The asshole was implanted into this reality system to be an asshole. Greek and ancient Greece was several hundred years before the Roman and the Colosseum. It just carried forth into Rome, and then that carried forth into the Vatican and the Catholic Church. It is the same thing because it is the same tribe, in my opinion. It's Notnilc. I'm still in the section of the book here on Greek and Roman myth and legend. And look, here's Ajax. How many times has the Notnilc, through its corporations, carried all the Greek and Roman myth forward? Is that still around, like Ajax ammonia or Ajax toilet cleaning products? Of course, it relates back to, not in this case a demigod or a god, but Ajax, a Greek hero under Agamemnon, who was mentioned in the Iliad and Odyssey as a key player with Achilles in bringing down Troy and the Trojan Horse and all that. I mean, it's so artificial, the number of times this Notnilc brings forth hundreds and hundreds of different cases, the Greek and the Roman myth. And it just, I mean, I was going to say, get on our friends and family for not noticing it, but we didn't notice it either until somewhat recently. It just doesn't make any sense why this old legend that mostly should have been forgotten about is, in this case, mentioned. It's a big part of corporate logos and corporate identities and the Saturn rocket. It's just all over the place. And that was the purpose of the video a few back, to notice how artificial this is. Whatever this is, it's extremely important to what we call Notnilc. Why say Saturn is so important in Kronos to Notnilc? And it relates back to, I remember Jordan Maxwell's speeches about the graduate at high school and college with the black robes, and we've all heard that. The judge's black robes and the mortar board on the head all relates back to the cult of Saturn and the cube. And yeah, we all know that. We all went through first grade truth. If anybody's, trying to cry out to me, get a clue. We don't care about that horse shit anymore. The main point is why Saturn is so important to Notnilc is not for us to figure out. Who gives a shit? Let it be important to Notnilc. We laugh at it. Crom laughs at your four winds, and we see how artificial it is, and we know it. You know what? We don't need it. We don't need one bit of it, the type of spiritual entity that we are. I'm sitting here, continuing to flip through the book. I had made notes and I had highlighted several sections that I want to talk about. And I really thought it would be one video. Now it's 4, and it will be more than this. There's just so much here that's interesting to talk about. And this just kind of hit me as I'm flipping through the pages, that when something is so big and so prominent and carried through time, like a stuffed Lenin or Humpty Dumpty, it's either needs to be said in this reality, it's a spiritual message, or it's important to Notnilc. Some Humpty Dumpties are very nefarious. They're not all good. But just think about how prominent and well-known the legend of the Trojan Horse is. Is there anybody on earth, almost, that doesn't know about the Trojan Horse? And it's been books and movies, and the Brad Pitt movie comes to mind, and he's Achilles. And so what does this really mean to Notnilc? And of course, they operate in analogy and metaphor. So it could be very simple. I mean, it could be a gigantic analogy or even metaphor for the Notnilc. Troy is us. Troy is bringing down. The fall of Troy could represent the spiritual being, or the moat around whatever true spirits that are left here. And there's something outside the gates, and what's it doing? It's playing a trick. The Trojan horse. Let it in. Let it in. Accept it in as a gift. I mean, is the Trojan horse and that story so prominent because it's basically the most simple analogy for what Notnilc is here to do to real spiritual beings, with us in this case representing Troy? Yeah, it could be that simple. That's generally how the Notnilc does business. And then just now, the Paul McCartney Billy song popped into my head. It relates potentially to the Trojan horse, and his band's name's Wings. What kind of creep would name their band Wings? Does there have to be an occult reference in everything? We're tired of it. Just stop it. But remember the Wings song? Somebody's knocking at the door. Been talking about this for years. Somebody's ringing a bell. Do me a favor, open the door. Let it in? What exactly does that mean? To me, it's probably a Trojan horse reference. How many of our real spiritual beings are here? Do us a favor, Notnilc says through Paul McCartney Billy. Open the door. Let us and the rest of our creeps in. And then you can degrade yourself and enter the digital world. Who knows? I think it's all related, but maybe I'm losing it. Next page in the book, here are the Amazons. Remember Gal Gadot? She's a gal, not what you think you are, Trans Paco Tacos. It's a real gal. Gal Gadot played the Amazon Wonder Woman. And we have the Amazon River. I mean, it's endless Greek and Roman references. The Amazon River. Did the local indigenous people have a say on that? They didn't have no say. The Notnilc told them what their major river is going to be called. And they said, you either accept it or we'll ship you off to Siberia. I thought, how naive of me to think in the first video we would get through all the gods and goddesses. This is part 4. There's so much to make fun of here, so much to talk about. This is going to be 20 to 25 parts. I hope you like it. Look at this, guys. This is for long-haul truckers. We're going to go forever here. Look at this. The Amazons, it is thought that their name refers to their breastless condition. What? For Amazons voluntarily remove their right breasts in order that they might more easily draw a bow. They didn't mention nothing about that in Wonder Woman with Gal Gadot in the opening scenes of that great movie. The ancient Greeks believed these fierce warriors periodically mated with men from other tribes, afterwards rearing their female children only, discarding the men. So wait, let me get this. They went off to other tribes because they need the men, they need to do the act. And then they had children, and then what is it, a man or a woman? Most in ancient cultures want the man. These sons of bitches want the woman. It's a man. Discard it. Where? The river. Is this the first origin of the discarding or throwing away of the white man? It could be. And then they cut off their right breast so they could draw a bow back? What the heck? Does that relate to what was said in Shallow Hal when he was stuck in the elevator with Tony Robbins? He said, let me put it, would you rather have a woman with half a brain or one breast? And he's like, well, how big's the remaining breast? That was an Amazon reference. I didn't realize it in Shallow Hal. During the Trojan War, they fought against the Greeks. They fought for Troy. How come that wasn't in the movie Troy with Brad Pitt? I would have liked to seen the Amazon women there with Gal Gadot and that Wonder Woman crew. They didn't make it in that movie. Moving on, here's a cocktail party fun fact about Aphrodite that nobody knows, that you'll be dying to deliver in the next cocktail party or work function. When the Titan Kronos, that's Saturn to you and me, he cut off the penis of his father, Uranus. That's a repeating theme, guys. They're always trying to cut off each other's dicks. What does it go? Goes back to Horus and Osiris, and that's what his brother wanted to cut off his dick. In this case, he cut off the dick of his father, and he did it with a sharp sickle. Well, that makes sense. It's Kronos. And then that's where the sickle came from, but we didn't realize that's the first real circumcision. He then cast the member, which is the dick, into the sea, where it floated amid white foam. What does that refer to? Inside the penis, Aphrodite grew and was then washed up onto a beach. A giant dick washed up onto a beach. And to the guy that approached it for the wrong reasons, the most beautiful, sexy woman of all time emerged from it. So nobody that's interested in the beautiful, sexy woman would approach a large dick washed up on the beach. That's just a real conundrum from the start. It says here, perhaps Aphrodite's greatest love was the handsome youth, that's like the two youths, the handsome youth, Adontis. Aphrodite fell in love with Adontis? I thought, who did we talk about a few minutes back? Narcissus was supposed to be the most beautiful man of all time. But the most beautiful, gorgeous goddess fell in love with Adontis because he was so good looking. Could you imagine, what was it in Saturday Night Fever, the 2001 Odyssey Club? John Travolta's out there. You should be dancing. Yeah, he thinks he's the shit, right? Vinny or whatever. It wasn't Vinny. What was his name? Tony Manero. He thinks he's the shit. What if those two came into the club? Adontis and Narcissus. Could you imagine what those New York women would do? And who do you think would be better looking, Adonis or Narcissus? Now, I've put that in the minds of you ladies for the rest of the afternoon. Have fun with that. Look at this. Because of her, Venus or Aphrodite's unruly behavior, Zeus, the king of the gods, caused Aphrodite to fall in love with Anchises, Anchises, the father of Aeneas. So Zeus caused Aphrodite to fall in love with some regular dude? It doesn't say here he ain't no demigod, he ain't no god, he ain't no cyclops. He's just a regular dude. That's like some ninth grader in high school being told that the captain of the cheerleading squad wants to that ninth grader should take her to the prom or something. It's that times a million. Hey, Anchises, yeah, what you want? I'm busy over here. Somebody's interested in you. These women down at the temple. I ain't interested in those skanks, those hoes. No, you ever hear of the goddess Aphrodite, the most beautiful thing to ever exist in the known reality system? She's interested in you. Get out of here. That's better when the captain of the cheerleaders asked me to prom and I was only in 8th grade. Could you imagine being some regular dude and being, who's the woman across the street that's staring at me? My God, man, it's Venus herself. That don't happen to regular dudes. That's some bullshit fantasy put into Greek myth. Now, there's a whole section here with a family tree. The lovers of Zeus. Zeus, king of the gods in the Greek, loved countless women, and he courted them in many forms. Why didn't he just walk up to him as a man and say, hey, I'm Zeus? He came to them sometimes as a bull. Ew, I thought Frank was kind of cute. Ew. As a bull, as a satyr, that's even worse. As a swan, that ain't sexy. Sometimes as a mortal man, well, that's good. He didn't feel too perverted on some days. And even in the form of, wait a second, even in the form of a golden shower? Is that where that came from? Now, his wife, Hera, was notoriously jealous and vengeful, pursuing without mercy his lovers and their offspring. Now, I have heard this part of the story many times. Hera, queen of the gods, wife of Zeus, who'd she blame for all these conquests? Who'd she take it out on? Zeus, who's cheating and taking these women by force in the form of a bull or a swan or a golden shower? Hera, she blames the poor women that were the conquest. She blames the lovers. Hera, if you're listening to me, and I'm sure you are, the little water girl, getting the water and lugging it back to the village in southern Sudan, and Zeus comes down before her in the form of a bull. A bull, she don't have much choice. You gonna blame her? Blame your husband. No, but she took it out on those that really were forced, that Zeus forced himself in different sick animal forms, and Hera took it out on them. Hera, what a real bitch. Here's someone we've looked at recently, so just 1 minute or less. How do we pronounce it? Asclepius, represents medicine, the staff or rod of Asclepius, just one snake around the rod, where the Notnilc hijacked that, where it uses the caduceus today, for the most part. I mean, the AMA still has the staff of Asclepius, but if you watch the TV show MASH, it's just the caduceus related to medicine is all over the place. The Notnilc was very interested in hijacking that for some reason, but let's just wrap up Asclepius. The Greek god of healing and the son of Apollo. The ancient association between snakes and medicine is probably due to the snake's apparent ability to renew its youth each year by sloughing off its own skin. At some point, under the fake story that the Army Medical Corps made a mistake, and they started using the Army Medical Corps in 1920-something or 30-something, started using the caduceus. And that's, you proletariat and great unwashed, how the caduceus made its way into medicine. Oh, sure. If you think it's a Notnilc hijack, you'd have to be one of those people. Turning a few pages, here is Atlanta. Well, it's Atlanta. I mean, of course, that's where that came from. Just take out the A. Atlanta. Then over here's Atlas. Atlas Van Lines, all these corporate names. I mean, it's just, okay. I guess I'm not going to mention that again. We could do a whole YouTube channel just on the Greek and the Roman carried through U.S. corporations. A few pages later, we have Cincinnatus, like Cincinnati, was a Roman hero who was instrumental in serving the early republic. Who would want to do that? Cincinnatus. I guess that's where Cincinnati, WKRP and Cincinnatus. That was Cincinnati. Here is the Notnilc beloved Saturn or Kronos. They're so in love with this beloved character, and if it does relate to the black robes and the cube, and who cares? Why they need that character so, these Notnilc creeps? Who knows? You think you need him? You need Saturn? I don't need him. You can have him. Give him to Mike. He eats anything. It'll just be 1 minute or less. We've been over this many times over the years. Kronos, who is the son, or the Titan, the son of Uranos. Remember, we talked about what he did to, you know what? He took that sickle out and he did a John Bobbitt or Elena Bobbitt to his own father. And Gaia is Kronos' mother. Is that where that came from? Gaia. The Earth Mother was Kronos' son. Oh, I see this is all starting to fit together. Then he cut it off. Then he married his sister. Ew! He married Rhea, his sister. And they started to have kids, and he started to get paranoid that he'd be replaced and he'd lose his power, as they all do. So he started eating his children, and Rhea wanted to save Zeus, so she just put him aside and put a rock in some sort of towel. It's like replacing a hot dog with just a rock in the bun, and he didn't even taste it. He just ate it thinking it was Zeus, and now his power is protected. Of course, you know what happens, as we all do. Zeus grew up, kicked his ass, is what he did. And then all the other gods got vomited up, and thank heaven they did. Here's the section on Hades, Zeus's brother, along with Poseidon, and it says here, at the division of the universe after the overthrow of their father. That's right. Remember I said Zeus kicked his ass. Did he cut off his thing too? Like Kronos cut his father's off? Did they carry forth that cut off the member tradition? I don't think so in this case. But it says here that Zeus took the sky. He said, I want the sky. Poseidon said, I'll take the sea. And Hades got the underworld. And it says here, he was pissed. What you giving me? You giving me the we're going to share the earth. It says all three share the earth. But you giving me the underworld? I'm getting fucked here. He said, what? He says, well, I'm the one that kicked Kronos' ass. I'm going to get first pick. And Poseidon here, your older brother, kicked your ass as we were growing up. You get the underworld. Now go deal with it. Oh no. Is this where this came from? This is the thing? There's a god here named Hermaphroditus. Was the bisexual, bisexual offspring of the messenger god Hermes and Aphrodite, the goddess of love. According to one Greek myth, this handsome boy excited the passion of Salmasius, who was a nymph of a fountain near the city of Halicarnassus. Oh, they're in love with the temple of Halicarnassus, one of the seven wonders of the world, the only one that completely has disappeared. We'll talk about that some other time. When the young Hermaphroditus ignored her attention, well, of course he's going to ignore her attention, thus the name. Salmasius prayed to the gods that she might be eternally united with him. Oh, I see. This is how it happened. The wish was granted, and when he bathed in some waters, and she merged with him physically. So now he got both parts. The result was a female boy. Oh, my goodness. This explains so much today in 2024. Although he was not emasculated like Attis, who cut off his own member. Here it is again, the repeating theme of a dick getting cut off. Why are they so in love with this? I mean, leave the sharp objects far away from the penises. What is going on here? Okay, here's Janus. Oh, the Notnilc also is in love with this son of a bitch. They love Janus. It doesn't get much play. The two-headed god looks forward and backward at the same time. Of course, January is named after Janus. January, a time for people to look backwards and forward, was sacred to Janus. Of course, the duality. And there's, in addition to Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, it's pagan, pagan, pagan. Oh, the Christians just don't notice, or this nation was founded as a Christian nation, but the days of the week, all pagan, January, February, all pagan, pagan, everything pagan, 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 but no, it just makes sense. And if you question it, you're one of those people. I always like this myth and story here. The Sirens were beautiful sea nymphs who charmed sailors. Most of the legend about the Sirens is getting the sailors to crash the ships up on the rocks, like Thulsa Doom saying, "Come to me, my child." And she just walks off the edge. The Siren's song, steer your ship here. Look how beautiful we are. Listen to how beautiful our song is. And then the ships just crash against the rocks, and I guess the Sirens just laugh. Who knows? What if they got their hands on the sailors and the sailors started to crawl up there? I think the song was related to their false beauty. Once they stopped singing, maybe they appeared like Roseanne Barr before the sailors. I don't know, but it says here, Odysseus he was experienced. He knew what these sirens were all about, and he said to his crew, "Plug your ears, or you're gonna fall for their bullshit." So the crew plugged their ears, and Odysseus like, "I want to hear it. I want to hear what this is all about." He wanted to experience it the way some of you want to do DMT and ayahuasca. So he chained him. His sailors chained him and tied him. It says here to the mast, so he could hear it. He'd be so tempted, but he couldn't break free. Hey, Odysseus, you had a lot of trust in your crew. I mean, all it takes is a small group to say, "We're going to get rid of the old man today." I told him I'd chain him to the sail, but I just put a few slip knots in. He's going to get out of there. He's going to crawl his ass up with the sirens, and they're going to eat him for lunch. A lot of trust in your crew there, Odysseus. What would you do? I think I'd play it safe and just plug the ears. I don't need to hear their bullshit. The sirens, actually, the way they're described here is very similar to Greg's first wife. Here's the story of King Midas, and what simple lesson does this teach? It was Dionysus, that son of a bitch, that granted him the wish. And so we could have any wish. And he says, of course, just like most men, and just the greed and the gold and the power, everything I touch shall become gold. And Dionysus was like, you better think that through. You sure you want that? You better, he's like, just do it. Just do it. He said, okay, all right. I tried to warn you. Fromers tried to warn you, and then of course he started to, touch the tree, it's gold, touch this, it's gold, and then he went, I got to use the bathroom. Uh-oh, can somebody hold it, do the shaky? He can't touch his thing. That's another issue with a member. Then he went to have an apple, and it turned to gold. Then he went to have his pasta primavera, and it turned to gold, although you turned a fork. The fork turned to gold, and then it turned to gold. He can't drink, he can't eat. Now, I'm pretty sure, I need to read ahead here, but Dionysus took the, quote, curse, which seemed like a gift, away. And then later, somehow he was involved in a fiddle competition between Apollo and another god, and he was sort of disparaging towards Apollo. And it says here, Apollo put ass ears on him. So he went from a guy that can touch anything and turn it to gold to a fat king with ass ears. And unlike more famous fables like Old Mother Hubbard, whatever curds and whey are, where the meaning is a little nebulous, the meaning behind the King Midas fable is rather clear and obvious. And for those in Australia, we have another corporate entity represented by Greek and Roman legend, Midas mufflers and brakes, and where they do oil changes, things like that. We have songs, got the Midas touch. But this actually, it's a little bit different from a Humpty Dumpty because this carries a good message, actually. That's an interesting story kids can learn from about greed and things like that. So this one's a little bit different. I mean, this one, it might make more sense why this fable was carried through time. It's not as artificial as all the others. Here is the famous story of Orpheus and his journey into the underworld to rescue his lost love from Hades. Her name is, what is it, Eurydice? Is it? It says here she's a nymph. Another nymph? Pop it. Oh, these nymphs are all over the place. How great were these nymphs? You got this guy Orpheus now. He's alive. He's risking everything to go into Hades. He's navigating the Cerberus hellhound to get her out. I mean, Matt, I guess that's where their word nympho comes from. Nymphomaniac. It's not just your average everyday woman. You would probably risk the underworld too. I doubt it. I doubt it. I don't leave the house much. So, okay, he actually is successful. He's Orpheus. He's a poet. He's a charmer. He's singer of songs. And he convinces Hades to restore her life and let her out. But, of course, there's always a condition. On one condition, Hades says, you cannot look back. Here we go again. Don't look back. You cannot look back at her until you are completely out of the underworld. Well, everybody knows what happens. This dumbass sneaks a little glance back at his lost love. It's a nympho. I don't blame him for looking. But of course, her life is then taken again, returned to the spirit world or wherever they go in the underworld to Hades, and he's destroyed by these demon things or ripped apart or something. And it says here, his head was all that remained, and his head was, I think it was in the river Styx, his head was yelling out, Eurydice! See, here we go again, that same theme we've talked about many times over the years, a repeating theme in reality. Don't look back. And yeah, Lot's wife comes to mind. You know, I'm sorry, there are parallels here. This is more ancient than the story of Lot's wife. Ancient Greece, and Rome, I'm sorry, predates the time of Jesus and the writings of the Bible, etc. No matter when the story of Sodom and Gomorrah was supposed to have happened. Lot's wife, don't look back at the cities. Well, she looked back and was turned into a pillar of salt. Forget that. It's a repeating theme in many different places that we have paid attention to over the years of don't look back. That is a stuffed Lennon Humpty Dumpty that we need to interpret for ourselves. Don't look back means something to us, and we'll talk about it again in the future. Here's Pan, who we've all heard of, the son of the messenger god Hermes, goat-horned and goat-legged, blew a conch shell horn that spread fear into all his enemies. And the interesting part here is the word panic. It says the word panic is derived from the god Pan. So there's a cocktail party fun fact for you. At the work party, I have to give the address and introduce the new boss. I'm panicked. Guess you know where that word came from? What? Panicked. It came from the god Pan. And the person looks back at you like, So, anyway, it might go over better for you. You should try it. And of course, right under Pan is Pandora. Pandora, the first woman created by Hephaestus, was the Greek Eve, the bringer of all sorrows for mankind. Yeah, as they all do. She was given a sealed jar that contained all the misfortunes of existence. Yeah, it's like giving a 5-year-old kid a big Snickers bar. Here, you hold this candy bar, but you don't open it. They had no idea she was going to be tempted to open it. I wonder how that works. But soon Pandora's great curiosity overcame the natural fear of what might be inside. She wasn't scared one bit of what was inside. She broke the seal, releasing sorrow, disease, and conflict on the world. Yeah, as they all do. And what was left inside? Hope. And here we have it, another ancient story that blames everything on women. And you know what? They're getting their revenge now, aren't they? I should know. I'm a white man in my 50s. And here is Paris, the handsome brother of Hector, the son of King Priam of Troy, who stole Helen from Menelaus, brought her back to Troy. Aphrodite was some way involved. Let's just talk about this. What a coincidence. In France, Paris is the name of the city. For all that Paris became, just happens to be associated with really the perfect Greek and Roman historical representation of beauty, art, lovemaking. You know, just like what a coincidence. I mean, we live in such a script. Of all the cities named Paris, it's the one that rose to prominence, that hosts the Olympics. And what a artificial script. This reality, in some sense, the Notnilc reality at least, should be ashamed of itself at times. I mean, do a little bit better. So he went to the beginning of the Brad Pitt movie is historically accurate if you believe in this myth. They just went for a visit. And with Menelaus and Agamemnon and Paris, that son of a bitch, he stole Helen away. He said, "You want to come with me? You don't want this guy, Menelaus. Just look at him. Look at him. He'll be fat as a house inside of 10 years. Now look at me. Look, why don't you come back to Troy? Got a jacuzzi tub. I don't know what he offered her, but the beginning of the Brad Pitt movie is very historically accurate. Watch it. Here is Persephone, daughter of Zeus and Demeter. And I mention it here for two reasons. One, she became, quote, queen of the underworld. I guess she was pawned off to Hades in some sort of arranged marriage that she probably wasn't too thrilled about. But in The Matrix, or it was The Matrix 2, remember the wife of the Merovingian is Persephone. It was played by Monica Bellucci. And in The Matrix, you know, the Merovingian's like the little king of the Matrix underworld, dealing in back alley information, smuggling programs. I mean, how appropriate that her name, the Monica Bellucci character, is Persephone. I mean, The Matrix is so far beyond just what people believe. It's the work of the Wachowski brothers and sisters. They're both. They became both, or they still. There's no way it just came from those two. I mean, that is ridiculous. It is so Notnilc. The Matrix, all four of them, is so important to Notnilc. Even the new ship in Matrix 4 is called the Yosemite. We'll get to that, like the god of memory. There's so many cross-references. I mean, Matrix Explained YouTube channels still making, hundreds and hundreds of videos talking about that this is alluding to this and this, all the different possible scenarios. No, it didn't come from the brothers and sisters, nor did it come from the people that run around the internet that said, "Oh, I made the Matrix. No, I wrote it. No, I wrote it." Some of their stories are somewhat believable, but I would advise you folks that we're dealing with Notnilc here, and it plays a trick. I wouldn't for 1 second believe these dummies that run around the internet say, "I wrote it. No, I wrote it." All these people say they wrote it, and a couple of people seem really believable. They have horrible, sad sob stories. You know what? I don't buy it. The person that might actually believe they wrote it, I don't buy it. The Matrix is extremely important to Notnilc and didn't come from no two brothers and sisters. And here's the Pleiades, is it? Or Pleiades, the 7 daughters of the Titan Atlas. I don't know, the 7 stars up there. I don't know if you call that a constellation in and of itself. I don't really care. They call that in the stars the Pleiades. One of the 7 is Electra. You have Electra Records. It's just endless. Absolutely endless. And we should be ashamed of ourselves because how unnatural this is, how they're carrying forth the Greek and the Roman in absolutely everything. And it just doesn't make sense how this keeps happening over and over again. We didn't really notice it the way we should have until 2 or 3 years ago, because we grew up with it. It just seems normal when you grow up in it. Then once you see it, you see how abnormal and strange it is. But the people around us, they'll never see it. They'll say to me, a lot of things, Matt, in this world need to be named. So what if they keep going back to the Greek and Roman? So there's 7 stars in a cluster, like everybody can see. They got to name them. What are they going to call them? Fred, Barney, Betty, Fred and Wilma, Daphne, Shaggy, Scooby, Fred. Is that 7? What are they supposed to do, Matt? Cartoon characters? You know what? I take it back. I'm shutting down the entire channel. The fact that they keep using the Greek and Roman and it don't mean nothing. There's nothing here called Notnilc. I'm embarrassed as to what I've done in the videos that I've made, and I'm shutting the whole channel down. But before I do, look who's next. Coming up next, the old friend of mankind, Prometheus, who gave mankind fire. Prometheus, son of a Titan, was originally on Zeus's side, an ally in his fight against Kronos. I believe it was Prometheus that convinced Zeus not to carry on the family tradition. Remember what Kronos did to his father with the sickle, and he cut it off and he bobbited it off? That's a verb. Now Zeus was going to cut his dick off. And Prometheus says, you don't want to do that, Zeus. You don't want to carry on that sick family tradition. You want to get near that thing? And Zeus says, you're right, man. Just put him in Tartarus or something, wherever they put him away till they make a bad movie with Liam Neeson and bring him back out again. So Prometheus it says here, was warming up to mankind, loved mankind. And Zeus, it says here, had hidden away fire, kept it from mankind. Oh, that's real nice, Zeus. And people cried out, how are we going to cook our eggs? I'm tired of eating raw eggs. It's disgusting. How are we going to cook our fish? I'm tired of putting fish on hot rocks. Zeus had kept it. So Prometheus stole the fire and he gave it to mankind. And Zeus then got pissed, real pissed at Prometheus, chained him to the rock, and y'all know what happened. Every day the damn eagle came and ate out his liver every damn day. Now, this gets back into that old carbon 6 on the periodic table, 666. Carbon is 6 electrons, neutrons, protons. How did they know back then? And all, remember those discussions we had? How did they know back when this myth was created that the liver is the most regenerative organ of the body? And it does grow back. That's the whole part of the Prometheus story. The liver of Prometheus was immortal and grows back, and that's part. And every day the eagle comes and eats it again, yet it grows back. And I'm sure, if somebody takes our livers, we ain't Prometheus. It doesn't just grow back totally, but it's regenerative, and that is a main part of the story. So how did they know? It's very similar in the Bible to the number of the beast. The number of the beast, it has nothing to do with Satan or Lucifer. It's not mentioned. It's the number of a man. It says it right there. It's the number of a man, and it's 666. Well, a man or a woman is carbon. It's 6 on the periodic table, 6 protons, 6 electrons, 6 neutrals. 6 neutrals, 6 neutrons. The 666 is man becoming the beast, or what Notnilc wants to devolve a man down to, just one side of the Vitruvian man, only identifying with the material and ignoring the spiritual. So when the Bible was written, how did they know carbon was carrying 6 protons or whatever? See, this sort of theme happens over and over again. It says there's no way, whenever this myth, or if they say the history of it is correct, they wouldn't have known anything about the regenerative power of the liver. I mean, we should look for these sorts of things, because I think they pop up in a lot of different places that maybe we haven't noticed. And at the end of the day, what are these things? Well, there are more false reality giveaways. Well, we have a few thousand, but I'd take a few more. They're fun. Oh, let me go back and insert this. The first grade truthers and the spitballers in the back. I hear you. I can always anticipate when you're going to put the spitball in. You not got one by me ever. Prometheus is Lucifer, man. Oh, I've never heard that before. Prometheus is. I will give you this, spitballers. They are all tied together. All these gods and goddesses. And you know what? It's like Amazon, and there's one company that delivers all the products, or maybe Amazon is owned by that master company, or what the company that Seed and Company, is that the one that owns all the stocks or something, where your social security number is a stock and all that horse shit? I laugh at that horse shit. You're on the stock market. It's a bunch of bullshit. Now, there's truth in it. but they take it literally, like we're being traded or something. There's truth in it, of course. It relates to loosh and energy, but we'll talk about that some other time. Put the spitballs down. Yeah, I've heard Lucifer, Satan, Prometheus. Yeah, everything in this world is like tied together. All gets back to like the same thing. Yeah, I know. Up next is one of the biggest stuffed Lenins of all time, Sisyphus. Everybody's heard about Sisyphus, and he rolls the rock and up the hill, and it just has to roll back down. Apparently, he tricked Zeus, did several things that Zeus didn't quite like. His punishment, it says here, was in Tartarus. Tartarus is below the underworld. Think how bad that is. And of course, we all know, has to roll the hill for eternity. Roll the stone up the hill. I mean, my mother had a statue, a little mini bronze type figurine of Sisyphus in our living room my entire life growing up. Again, one of the best ways to expose these things as Humpty Dumptys is to do like the elevator pitch meeting, which is for me / the guy presents the story at the bar. Whether it's real or not, let's say half of this myth is real, which of course I don't believe it's real. But somebody tells somebody at a bar, whether it was real or not, the legend of Sisyphus, and Zeus condemned him, and as soon as the rock got to the top of the hill, it had to roll all the way back down, and he had to start over again for eternity. The person listening to the bar would be like, well, that's pretty interesting. Are you going to tell that to anybody else, what I just told you? And the guy would say, no. It wouldn't go anywhere. This is the elevator pitch meeting / guy in the bar is the best way to expose Humpty Dumptys. Okay, guys, let me close with the most interesting part of all of this. I'm not sure how long this will go, 5 or 10 minutes. I hope to make an entire video out of this. This part is proof of Notnilc. Either it's real, and all these gods existed, all the demigods and heroes and the stories about killing the Medusa, and everything's basically real or tied into a real story, even if it was exaggerated, and I'm not ready to go there, of course, or is an incredible organizing force in this world called Notnilc to bring all these stories to the masses and have these stories carried through for, in some cases, thousands of years. So we just got through the Greek and Roman in this gigantic book in front of me. That's it. Just the Greek and Roman. There's all these other, it's called pantheons of gods. So in other sections of this book, of course, the Egyptian gods, Ra and Osiris and Horus, and Celtic or Celtic myth with their gods, heroes, stories, demigods. Over here is the Norse myth. Some of the names are very familiar, Odin and Thor, but there's a whole list here, 50, 60, 70 other things we've never heard of. It just goes on and on, stories, legends, gods, and then the gods from India and China, in Japan, all over the world, each having its own, say, quote, pantheon of gods, page after page, gods, legends, demigods, heroes, etc. Now, I might be a simpleton. There's only two options here. One is, and if you're not quite following me, I'm not sure how clear this is. Just give me a few minutes. Either it's all real, I'm not ready to put my roulette chip there, or there is a organizing force in this world that I call Notnilc, people have other names for it, that unnaturally has organized this. Meaning there's no way these stories can still exist. There's no way to even propagate them in the first place. We'll go through that elevator pitch meeting. Unless, again, the religious structure of each region of the world to propagate this through the religion, through one's salvation. That's the only way to do it. And if it's not real, well, who made the stories up if it's not real? Where did all this come from? It's not as amazing, actually, that it all still exists. It's amazing that it first existed. How do you even start spreading the word about these stories and these legends, demigods, gods? Let me just literally flip to a random page here in Celtic or Norse myth and just read from 1 or 2 pages. Just list the names and you'll see what I'm talking about. Okay, here we are. If these gods or goddesses and demigods are listening, I apologize. Bill, do not put them in the light, those waiting for me in the light poster. I don't mean to offend. I have to go through this as quick as possible so you get a sense. So I'm going to butcher the names. Just going to read from the first one and then we'll go very quickly. So, boom, page 114, random. Myths of the Celtic or Celtic world. The Cathbad. In Irish mythology was a seer and druid, an advisor to blah, 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 Cathbad. Sir Idwin was a Welsh god, blah, fertility, blah, blah, blah. Okay, faster. Cernunnos, we know that from CERN, etc. Caesar, Cesar. Cleodina, sorry. Conair More, the Celtic, have you ever heard that language? This is probably the worst one to try to go through quickly. Conall, Conchobar, McNessa, Conlai. See, we're in the seas. Cormac, MacArt, Creedine. This is so butchered. I should have picked another pantheon. Chuchlan, that's not Cthulhu. Okay, this is bad. Dagdas, Sinon, page after page after page after page after page after page. That's what I want to emphasize here. So you have potentially thousands of pages in a book that could be written about the gods of each pantheon. Again, we know the Greek, we know Zeus, we know Saturn, we know the Roman. Many of us, of course, know the Egyptian, Horus, Osiris, Seth, etc. This exists everywhere, though. Again, China, Japan, India, all over the place. Gods and lists of gods you've never heard of. There's only two options. What am I missing? Tell me in the comments. Either it's real. If it's real, it could propagate itself. If the people saw Thor come down through the Bifrost, that word would spread. If it's real, who are you? I'm Thor. Write about me. Okay, come back in a week and I'll show you what I wrote. If it's real, sure, it would spread. They saw wondrous things and real gods and Zeus. And okay, if it's not, forget how it exists today. That's unnatural. How did it ever get going? That's the part that's so fascinating to think about. And I'm sure many of you aren't quite seeing it the way I'm seeing it. You're kind of blowing it off like that's no big deal. If you think about it carefully, it is a big deal. So let's pick this pantheon of gods over here for this region of the world, whatever. 1,000 pages, hundreds of... Okay, I've emphasized that. How many there are. How do you get it started? How do you get it started? Well, it can't just come up in a bar, right? Sort of pitch meeting. Let me tell you about this god in the bar. It can't, even if it was an interesting story told by a bard in a bar, it wouldn't go anywhere. It wouldn't. The father then drinking at the bar wouldn't come back and tell it to his family. And if he told it to his family, the kids wouldn't then tell it to their friends. It just wouldn't go anywhere. And if it did, it wouldn't be consistent. How is it the name of Thor's hammer that I'm not going to try to pronounce is consistent? Even the spelling of it, how's that possible? So again, this is proof. This whole thing is about proof of Notnilc. There's only one way to do it. It would be done through the religious power structure of each region for one's self-salvation. Do you want to go to Valhalla? You need to know the gods. And it's just like language. It's all laid down in advance, unless you believe it's real. If it's not real, it's made up. If it's not real, I'll give equal weight, whatever. What do I know? I don't know if these beings walk the earth. I'll leave anything on the table. I'm open-minded. I consider myself a big thinker. It's not insane to think that some of these beings walked the earth or whatever. Absolutely not. What's insane is to believe the evening news at night. That's the height of insanity. But I'm not going to put my chip on that it's real. So the organization of it is impossible if there's not this underlying power structure here, I call Notnilc, that has supernatural capabilities and reality buttons and levers. So let's pick, here's the gods of ancient China and Japan. Okay, here's the thousands of pages already. How do you start propagating? How do you get hundreds of millions of people in some cases to know these gods? Well, if it's through the religious structure, then that's still proof of Notnilc for each region because somebody had to literally make all this up, right? And then how is it consistent? The myth is consistent all over the region. How is that possible? There ain't no internet. There ain't even no reading is fundamental. There's no, you can only spread it via word of mouth. How does it stay so consistent? And the consistency or the characteristics of each god, not just existing for that time period, but carried through time where those characteristics or the name of Thor's hammer is even maintained today. So the point of this discussion, and I don't know how this is coming out, We've done the Humpty Dumpty stuffed Lenin things many times, and many of you or most of you agree that, yeah, this is artificially carried through time, and this stuff, and it's not just gods and goddesses, it's all over the place, the Humpty Dumpty factor. This stuff shouldn't exist. It should have gone away a long time ago. Old Mother Hubbard, or the little woman that lived in a shoe, and all that stuff. Ring around the rosy. There's millions of examples at this point. But the more fascinating thing we've never talked about is regarding these gods and these pantheon of gods. How did it even start? How is it so consistent and well known for each region? That is a power structure that has supernatural capabilities. That's why I call it Notnilc. Far beyond anything that you could imagine being the Vatican being. There's just no way. And there is no, in these regions, if you go do endless research on the Norse myth and the Celtic or the Celtic, you'll research in tribes and go watch Braveheart. That's how it was. And there was no $100 billion major organization like Vatican sitting on the Tiber River in Rome. There wasn't that organization was there. I think it had to be there, in my opinion, but you didn't point at it. There's no gigantic, massive religious infrastructure going back, as far as I know. I haven't done a tremendous amount of research on it, but going back into the hills of Scotland and Northern Ireland and Wales and Ireland itself. And is this point I'm making coming out properly? How did it get started? I mean, I don't know. Let's just go back to the absolute basics. Go watch Braveheart, right? Isn't that generally the way they were living in 1300, 1400, and 1500 in Scotland and Northern Ireland, what's today Wales, most of England? Isn't that generally the way with these clans and these small towns and things like that? And William, somebody's coming. It's the McGregors from the next clan. I mean, isn't that the way they were living? Didn't I just prove it? Is it? I mean, okay, the McGregors from the next clan are coming. They say, who are your gods? And the McGregors were the same as your gods. How do they all have the same gods? How did it propagate across hundreds of miles? If the McGregors talked about their gods to the William Wallace Brady Bunch, and he's like, well, I don't want those gods. Well, okay, that's your stories. Well, why is it my stories? So there is a religious, okay, that's not a great example because, of course, we see, even in Braveheart, we see the Catholic priest. We see the Jesuits invading feudal Japan in Shogun in 1600 or whatever it is. But before, let me go back in time even more then, 900 AD, 700 AD, 500 AD. These are ancient myths, this list of gods. How I'm saying it only could propagate and be consistent if there's an underlying power structure. As usual, the masses today are not aware of it. The masses then and the clans then were not aware of it. There's only one way to propagate it. If this Notnilc exists, this back end is proof of Notnilc. Now, the most ancient gods going back through India, of course, and China, but we'll leave that alone. Other than the gods from India, everybody knows that are still part of the Hindu religion today, of course, Vishnu, Brahma, Krishna, etc. Krishna is one of the incarnations of Vishnu, Kali. Other than, okay, we all know that. The Chinese, the ancient gods of China, people don't know, but let's go back a little bit more recent to the gods everybody knows. We'll just do ancient Egypt and walk through that example to see how this could possibly play out. Okay, it's like 3,500 BC, for example, and you're living along the Nile River. The truthers believe they're experts on these gods of Egypt. I know Osiris. I know the Eye of Horus, but there's all sorts of gods that aren't even talked about much that were just as significant. Ptah, Ptah was one. One of the original ancient gods, even on the same level as Ra, Amon, A-M-O-N, Amon-Ra, they're two separate gods. The newer gods are Ra, Osiris, Set, Horus, etc. Anyway, it doesn't matter. This actually is not the greatest example because if you have a pharaoh and you have a gigantic military/king infrastructure with its religious infrastructure and alkalites, it would be somewhat easy to propagate, to make all these gods consistent amongst your people. You'd build the temples and things like that. So this isn't the greatest example. It makes less sense if you think of like Braveheart and these clans and clans across India, and they share the same gods. How? See, this is not a great example because, Cairo, and before that Memphis, you have the infrastructure of the emperor or pharaoh, and it's military. And there's only still two options. We still should, I guess, start here. It's either real. Hey, Pharaoh Ramses, what are you going to do today? Anything I want, God. I'm waiting for Ra to come down, or he's going to meet me for lunch. It came down. Maybe certain scenes from Stargate actually played out. It was a technology. Who knows? Okay, whatever. Let's just put that aside. My default is going to be it's made up. Sorry, that's just kind of where I need to go right now. If I had to pick one, it was a roulette table. You got to pick red or black. I'd have to pick made up. I'm not going to pick Ra came down on a magic carpet and had lunch with Ramses. I'm not going to pick that if I had to pick red or black. So, okay, it's made up, and in this case is not a great example. It makes sense because it would be, but again, all made up by their priests, right? No, nothing real to it, right? Just made up. And then propagated out in why, of course, and even the first grade truthers in the back. If this is playing out correctly, to keep people in line, of course, to make people fearful of the gods, then the pharaoh and the religious infrastructure and the acolytes and the temple of Delphi or whatever insert themselves. I know that's not Egyptian pantheon. Insert themselves as a gatekeeper, if you will, between the gods and paradise. And hey, Anubis is going to come to see you, and you want him to take you to the right place where your heart's going to be weighed against a feather. Bill put Anubis in the person waiting, not a person, a god waiting for Matt in the light. So I got to deal with Anubis, not just Madame Blavatsky and some of those other villains that I've cut up and criticized over the years. So, okay, this makes sense to a degree. Again, all made up, but you could see how it was propagated. How does it make sense throughout the vast regions of whatever? Pick a part of the world where these pantheons of gods and these, you could go to the library and just get book after book about the ancient gods, deities, myths, and heroes of this region, of that region, whether it be China, Japan, wherever. How is it? It gets back to what I was saying. I guess I'm becoming a little repetitive here. How is it consistent? How is the myth consistent? Even the pronunciation of the gods, but more importantly in this exercise, something we've never done, how did it get started amongst the territories or regions of the earth, whether it be China, Japan, whatever, where it's consistent, where each clan or each town may be many, many miles away with no internet, no phone, and no reading is fundamental. I'm sitting here just staring at the wall for many minutes, thinking that the propagation of any religion into the billions is a reality breakdown to me. It doesn't make sense in any way, even Christianity. It doesn't make sense. Let's go back to the elevator pitch meeting again, and I'll try to leave all the options and represent you fairly on the table. Take your side of the podium here. I'll be fair, but okay. Jesus came, did his thing. We all know what he did. Then the disciples, and they wrote about it, and it was something called the first translations of what could be the four Gospels, not 2 years later or 5 years later, but started to spread a few hundred years later. It didn't go anywhere for quite a while. So, okay, we have these stories of Jesus. Let's just say, I don't know how this came to be or how this happened, and I don't care really what a book says. Nobody will ever know how this spread. It's just impossible to know at this point. But somebody brought the New Testament to this town, wherever, in whatever country, and started talking about Jesus Christ. Well, why would anybody? You grew up with it. The Christians say you grew up with it. I would say there's very few Christians here that didn't grow up, that their parents weren't Christian. If you had you have to be fair with this. If you have a series of gods, whether they be of whatever pantheon here that we're looking at in this book, and somebody comes and says, I've got these books that eventually will be a Bible. Here's Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and something that will eventually be the New Testament, or however they presented it. I want to talk to you about what the Son of God actually is God. Jesus was just here a few hundred years ago. Maybe some people would listen, but who would adopt it if they grew up with gods that their parents had, that their grandparents had? It just doesn't make any sense to me how it could have propagated, how Islam could propagate to over 1 billion people. Okay, here's the first person running up on a town that wants to talk about Muhammad. There is only one God, and his prophet is Muhammad. Okay, well, maybe somebody in the town would listen. Most would say we got our own gods. I don't understand how that would, okay, back up. The Christian would say that, Matt, it propagates because Jesus there's a supernatural factor. Jesus is God, I think they would say. It doesn't have to be logical how it propagates. People will intrinsically, if that's even a word, instinctively know deep down who the real God is, who the real Savior is, and they will be very open, wide-eyed and open to God's word and what the teachings of Jesus. It propagates because it's God's will to propagate. Matt, there's a supernatural aspect to it, Matt. I understand. Okay, but then how do you explain the same propagation to a similar sized population of Islam and Muslims? And by the way, it's a tiny little group over here, just a small group, nobody, like 15 people. Buddhists, maybe there's like 20 Buddhists in the world. 1 billion? 1 billion of those sons of... Okay, there's another over here that's propagated over many, many centuries, far more ancient, but there's like 20 of these people. Hindus, there's 20 or 25, 1.4 or to 5 billion? Holy heck, how do these religions propagate? Yeah, Christian will say, well, Jesus made it so. Well, then how did the Muslim and Islam propagate it in a very similar way? Again, I don't get it. The first person that, if I'm in Braveheart, right? I'm out there. There's 3 kids in the beginning, not just William Wallace and Hamish throwing the rocks. And with your father gone, I'm out there throwing the rocks at the skulls too. Okay, well, that's a bad example. Say that's 500 years before, 600 years before. We have our, wherever it may be in Scandinavia or Denmark, wherever that is, the Norse myth or whatever. And here comes somebody riding up that wants to talk to me about the Last Supper and the apostles and Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Well, okay, how long are you going to be in town? Just a day, like a missionary, right? Just a day. All right, you're going to tell me about this? And you go, oh, okay. Like, you're just going to abandon everything? You've abandoned all your gods? Just throw it all out? Just because somebody came in, rode in on a white horse to tell you about Jesus? Okay. And again, the Christians say, well, yes, they will, because they know it's the one true God. Then explain how Islam propagated in the same way. Okay, and there's by the way, I mean, the similarity, not similarities, but, well, I don't know any other way to say it. There is so many crossovers between Islam. I know that Christians don't want to hear this. Oh, God, plug your ears. Even going back to Abraham and Isaac and Jacob, the crossovers between Islam and Christianity are significant. And I'm no expert at it. Maybe I started to take a religious studies class at Penn State. I dropped it. I think you could drop classes up to 10 days. I don't like this, and go take basket weaving or take what the football players were doing. I did take rocks for jocks. It was far harder than I thought. We sat at these big banged up lab tables, like all scratches and marks, and I know why. The teacher kept bringing out big boxes of rocks, and it would be passing them around. Look at this, sandstone. Like, who cares? But then they started passing around the pyrite. That's fool's gold. It's very common. Half the class of retards started putting it in their pocket, trying to steal it. It's not worth anything. It's worth less than sulfur, you idiots. Sorry. Guys, this might be the last video on mythology in a while. This is the 4th one I've done in about 3 or 4 weeks. I expected to get to the individual gods in the first video. I didn't even get to it, and we only did the Greek. So if you like this sort of thing and you want to do the Egyptian god by god, or the Celtic or the Norse or the Japanese or the Chinese, you want to keep doing this, let me know in the comments. I know from the view counts, people aren't really loving this as much as other things, put it that way. Some of these mythology videos maybe, got 20% less views. But if you really like it or you want to keep doing the pantheons, say once every 3 or 4 weeks, we'll go through and do what we did today with the pantheons around the world and try to continue the back end conversation that we're having here. Thanks a lot.